Welcome to the Wealthworthy Podcast. I'm Trisha.
Hi, I'm Darian.
Thank you for joining us. This week we'll be talking about the imposter syndrome. That's all about people not feeling that they belong in a certain position or situation, even though they may have earned it. You might feel like you're a fraud or you're fooling people simply because you're in a certain position. But the reality is that you're smart, you work hard, and you make mistakes just like everyone else, but that doesn't take away from what work you do. Has this ever personally affected you, Darian?
I would have to say no, only because for me, I always believe in just going for what you want in life and knowing that whatever it is you're doing and wherever your journey is taking you, that's the position or the place where you're supposed to be. I think everything works out the way it's supposed to work out.
This really comes into play when you're in a new position or someone is willing to place you in a situation where you aren't fully comfortable, or somebody's given you a new challenge, you've taken on a new challenge. And so that's when it starts to be a question of, do I belong here? Like, are my opinions valuable in this situation? Are people seeing more out of the situation than what's really there? You start to question it. And it's really something that impacts about 70% of the population. So it's widespread, and people generally just don't talk about it because it's an inner thought process that's going on. Whether you feel confident in a situation or you're just trying to figure out what your next move looks like. So for me, I know there have been times where when you're thinking through, like, hey, can I negotiate in this situation? And you might opt to negotiate, but you'll change or think through like what the amount you're targeting actually looks like based on how you think other people might perceive you. And the reality is that you should just place focus on what are you providing. Sometimes the skill set that you have is different than what other people have on the market, but that doesn't necessarily mean that one is better than the other. And it also makes me think of when Michelle Obama had been doing her book tour. She mentioned that people aren't always that smart at the table. And we always have that perception that this person that's here is here because they're smart, but you're also there because you're smart too. So whether you feel it within yourself or not, you don't need the validation all the time just to help you get over this imposter syndrome. So that brings us to the next question of what can we actually be doing to overcome this?
To overcome it, you just have to know that you belong in whatever it is you're doing, whatever position you have. You have to know that you're there for a purpose and a reason, and you're impacting the team and you bring something to the table. I think it's just about knowing your worth and knowing what you bring to the table and being okay with it and confident in that, knowing that whatever it is you're doing, you're impacting someone's life. Whether it's 2 people or 3 people, you're making an impact. And if you weren't making an impact, you wouldn't be in the position that you're in currently.
I'd add on that just building relationships with people in that space can help you to feel like you belong. And then along those same lines, you want to find mentors to help you to understand what their steps have looked like. Because sometimes just the fact that you don't know what the end goal looks like or what the end of that process looks like, it makes it feel scarier than it should be. And so just a full understanding of like what other people have gone through, even though that might not be your next step, it's still good to see how people think through their process. And of course, if you're able to recognize what your strengths are, then you can play on your strengths. So it doesn't make you feel like you're in a situation where you can't perform as well as you expect to, because it's something that you're already good at and continue working on. So what type of consequences do you think the imposter syndrome could have on your wealth?
It makes you second guess yourself. So it's like if you got the role you wanted at your job, you're finding where you want to be, you're impacting your team, you've been a team player, you're just doing everything the correct way. But I think when you think about imposter syndrome, it's just something that can make you second guess things. So like, am I really supposed to have this role? Are you making an impact? And I think that's not always good because you shouldn't second guess yourself. I think it's just about owning your craft and being confident in whatever it is you're doing.
And as I mentioned with the example of negotiations, if you feel when you come to the table that you're not good enough or that they may not perceive you as good enough, then you're more likely to not put a reasonable figure out there or to negotiate even though you're at the negotiation table, right? Which would translate into less money or less earnings for you. But also, if it's a situation where you're in a meeting and people are expecting that you speak up, but you're not saying anything, you're not willing to raise your hand, you don't want to be wrong in that situation, then it places you in a position where you are now cowering your own authority, right? Like the more you speak up, the more that people understand your place in whatever situation, the more they start to see you in that light. But if you start to say, when I come in this room, I'm not even going to speak up anymore, or I'm not going to do something specific, it could be damaging in the long run because people may not continue seeing you in that light. And I think too, when we're changing industries or anything that we take on that's new, it really takes a toll if it's something that's really different than anything you charted before. So if you haven't done something, of course, you don't feel like, oh, I'm going to be able to dominate in this space right away. But that doesn't mean that you shouldn't keep pushing forward. So the biggest thing is figuring out how to continue pushing forward. Another question around this is just whether or not you think this is a gender-specific problem, because it's something that you haven't had to deal with or you haven't knowingly dealt with it. And for me, there's specific situations where I think it can take shape, but what do you think about whether or not it's a gender-specific problem?
I don't think it's a gender specific problem. I think everyone deals with it. It just may not be broadcasted as heavily. Everyone deals with it. It's just like with something you may not know that you're dealing with it at that particular time until someone brings it up, like we're doing in this setting. So it's kind of like something new to think about in the back of your mind.
Agreed. It's definitely something that can impact both genders, and we just have to be conscious of exactly how we're dealing with it and how we opt to move forward so that it doesn't become a big deal. Because even a number of celebrities say that they've dealt with the issue before. I saw a couple of sightings of Maya Angelou and Albert Einstein dealing with the imposter syndrome, feeling like they were going to be found out at some point. And those are two names that we all think of and revere greatly. We wouldn't even think that there's any reason for them to second guess anything that they're doing. But even they had that same feeling of, like, oh my goodness, even though I've done this a number of times, or even though I've already received praise for it, I may not be as great as people think I am. And a lot of that just comes from us feeling human, where we just feel like I'm giving what I consider my best, but you don't always expect people to accept that as well as you would want them to. So when it does pan out better than you could even imagine, it may be something that you're second guessing and trying to figure out how to live up to. So what would you say is the issue with imposter syndrome?
It puts doubt in your head. It makes you feel like you don't belong in whatever arena or field you're in. So even if you're qualified to have that position, or even if you're not qualified to have that position, it just makes you doubt yourself and pretty much puts you at a standstill because you don't know if you can go on or if you're going to be a success at whatever it is you're doing. And I think you kind of have to break that. And it's something that's more of a mental thing. So you have to just break it and just know that you'll succeed, you'll be successful, and you'll be able to get the job done.
One of the big issues that I see is just the idea that you'd be downplaying some of the achievements that you have or the ambitions that you're working towards, where really you need to be thinking through what next steps look like, being able to brag on yourself in a reasonable way, right? Of course, you don't want to sound extra braggadocious, but you do want to have people understand exactly what your achievements are and where you currently stand so that they can anticipate some of the things and expect more from you. I think, too, it could cause you to lose motivation if you're trying different avenues, but you still don't feel adequate. So you want to feel like you are continuously motivating yourself and other people can help move that along. But if you have any kind of negative criticism around you, you don't want that to deter you completely from what you're doing. When we think about celebrities in general, we all have our opinions on which people or which things we like about what they have going on. But just because they're not our taste doesn't mean that someone else doesn't think that they're doing a great job. And if everyone as individuals had that same kind of criticism coming at them all the time, how do you make it so that you can continue doing what you know you need to get done so that you can push your goals further without letting all that noise cloud your judgment?
You hit the nail on the head. Keep doing what you know you need to be doing, because at the end of the day, you have to take care of you and your needs first, and everyone else. You have to understand it's just an opinion, and their opinion don't matter because they're not in the position that you're in. Even though they may have an opinion, they're not walking the same path you're walking each day, nor they're doing different things that you endure each day. So you have to just be okay with that and understand that you're putting your best foot forward in the things that you're doing, and understand that people's opinions are their opinions, but you know what you have to do for you and yours first.
I think the biggest thing is you don't want to let other people determine what your future looks like. And you don't want to let fear hold you back from doing what you need to do to move forward. So the thing to take away there is do whatever the next step looks like. You want to be outside of your comfort zone, but you can find the tools that you need to help you to move forward. You don't have to know the answer. Just because you don't know the answer doesn't mean that you can't move forward. And even when we think about what jobs we could be doing, when you look at a job description, just because you don't check all the boxes doesn't mean that you wouldn't be a great fit for that job. So just take that into consideration whenever you're doing something so that you can say, well, even though I don't have this, I do have these other things, and I bring something else unique to the table, whatever that might be, right? Just the fact that you were working in different industries or you had been communicating with different people, you have a certain network that you bring to the table. All of those things can be more valuable than what's actually already outlined in a job description, right? Like, not all job descriptions are asking for a specific kind of personality or specific kind of person, but that doesn't mean that those aren't valuable skills in there. So all of those soft skills that you might bring, all of the networks that you might have, all of those things are valuable when you come to the table. Regardless of how you feel in a current situation, just try to think through, how can I raise my hand for things? How can I take on tasks that pushes me outside of my comfort zone? And how can I translate that into more income? All right, so hopefully you can think a little bit differently anytime that imposter syndrome starts sneaking into your mindset. Like, figure out how to turn that around to make it more positive, and you will be in a great position to continue growing, learning, and earning. Thank you. Bye.
Bye.